We all have been focusing in part on what the central bankers have been saying over the ECB meetings in Europe, and I'm sure you have been as well. And Jay Powell, the Fed chair, actually talked yesterday about the extent to which he's seeing businesses really looking at the trade tensions, frictions, even perhaps incipient war. Listen to what he had to say. I'm sure you know what it was, but listen to what he had to say.
We have a very wide range of contexts in the business world in the United States and around the world, and as we talk to them, they continually and increasingly express concern over trade developments. Those concerns seem to be rising. For the first time, we're hearing about decisions to postpone investment, postpone hiring.
So, Mr. Secretary, you heard what he had to say. He is seeing really postponement of decisions to invest, one of the things that's been a priority for this administration. Are you seeing that?
No, I'm here at Select USA, which is our big annual foreign direct investment conference. We have over 3,000 delegates here from 66 foreign countries, and they are all here because they're interested in increasing their investment in the United States. And I believe over the next couple of days, we will have some very big announcements to make about new transactions that these folks are entering into. So I don't think that that's true, that there's some big change. I think the media have been very negative on the Trump administration. They pick out some little company somewhere and they say, oh my goodness, this guy is having troubles, and they extrapolate that into the whole country.
Okay, fair enough, Mr. Secretary. Let's take one that's not a little company. Let's take Daimler, which is a big company that this morning said because of the issues with China, they are taking down their profit estimate. And as you probably know, the stock price went down and took the stock 600 down with it, and actually took S&P futures down with it. That's not a small company, sir.
No, it's not. But I don't hear what we've done that hurt them.
Well, what it is the imposition by China of tariffs in response to what we've done on exporting SUVs from South Carolina to China. And that was in direct response to the actions we've taken.
Oh, the retaliation, sure. Well, naturally, there's going to be some retaliation by the foreign countries, and they will try to pick out politically sensitive areas to deal with. But at the end of the day, we are a net importer, not a net exporter. And that means a very fundamental truth. Take China. They sell us around half a trillion dollars a year of goods. We only sell them around 150 billion. That means once they put tariffs, if it went that far, on the whole 150, they have nothing more that they can do. We could go theoretically all the way up to the 500. That's not a very easy game for them to play, and it's similar ratios with the other countries. That's what President Trump means when he says that if it really does get to be a big war, we have many more bullets than any of these other countries.
Right. When it comes to tariffs, but there are other ways, obviously, of hurting imports, non-tariff barriers. And in the last statement out of China, actually, what they specifically said was quantitative and qualitative, so that tariffs are not the only way that they can retaliate.
No, it's true, and nor are they the only way that we can retaliate. The truth is that China, Europe, a lot of other big countries have been using non-tariff trade barriers for a long, long time. They put on weird standards that it's impossible for American products to meet. They put in all sorts of elaborate and non-science-based restrictions. For example, some of these countries keep complaining, oh, we can't import U.S. beef because of mad cow disease. Well, do you think mad cow disease is really rampant in the U.S.? I haven't heard a report of it in years. Similarly, some countries say, well, we can't import your chickens because of Asian flu. When's the last time you heard a case of Asian flu in the United States? It's all nonsense. The truth is that they've been very protectionist. We have been very close to free market. And now that we're trying to defend ourselves against their bad practices, they're screaming and yelling. Well, they've been spoiled for many, many years, and that game is over.
And Mr. Secretary, I really think there's no one who knows about the situation who would deny that China has been protectionist in all sorts of different ways. I don't think anyone would take issue with that, in the media or otherwise. At the same time, what happens when there's a tension between, on the one hand, growth and jobs, which was what the president's first order of business was, tension between that on the one hand and getting fairness and reciprocity. If you have to choose between the two, would you rather have less trade and less growth and have it be fairer and more reciprocal?
Well, we want it to be fairer and more reciprocal. Reciprocity is an important keynote to our trade policy. The question is, how do you get there? And the only way we're going to get foreign countries to lower their inordinate barriers is by making it more painful for them to continue those practices than to get rid of them. That's what this is all about. This is about an end game that really is free, fair, and reciprocal trade. It's not about trying to make money out of tariffs. That's not really the end game here at all, but we need something to induce changes in their behavior. And it's already happening. In steel and aluminum, once we put our tariffs on, suddenly Europe is taking safeguard measures all over the place to protect their border. They weren't doing that before we put the tariffs on. Japan had never had a trade enforcement group in METI, their big government agency. Now they have a 20-person trade enforcement group. We're going to fix the problem of protectionism around the world, and we're going to fix it by making it more painful for those countries to do bad practices than to do the right thing, which is to lower the trade barriers and lower their tariffs.
And once again, Mr. Secretary, I don't think anyone would quibble with that as a goal, a laudatory goal. The question is, though, how much pain are we willing to suffer in order to get that done? Because the pain goes both ways. And for example, Deutsche Bank is out with estimates that, in fact, a trade war actually could take 3/10 off of GDP growth. If you knew today that that was the price you had to pay, would you be willing to pay it in order to get to reciprocal trade?
Well, it's very hard to make an omelet if you don't break some eggs. And so we have no choice but to change the way that these other companies and countries are using unfair trade practices against us. We have to do it. It's unfortunate that it wasn't done at an earlier point in time. It would have been a lot simpler, a lot easier, and a lot less painful. But it's really important that we do it because we're talking about our future.
And that is more important than the growth goal? Because, I mean, the Republicans came up with, the president put forward a tax plan that really was growing GDP nicely. Are you giving a fair amount of that back in order to get to the reciprocal world that you want?
Well, we don't think so. And we think that you'll continue to see very strong employment. The biggest problem most American companies have now is finding enough qualified labor to do the expansions that they're putting forward. That's why you're seeing all of these apprenticeship programs, all of these joint programs with local community colleges. Finding workers is the biggest problem right now for American industry, not anything else, because we've cut the regulations, released those shackles, we've cut both individual and corporate taxes, making America a wonderful destination for foreign investment and direct U.S. And that's why we have here at Select USA Summit over 3,000 attendees. We have 66 countries represented here. That's 15 more countries than we had a year ago. We have 5 cabinet secretaries here. We've got 14 ambassadors, U.S. ambassadors to foreign countries. This is a real turnout, and we will be making some announcements about new foreign direct investment into the U.S. That's the real world, not the whiners who have criticized every single thing that the president has done. They said he'd never get a tax bill through. Well, he did. Then they said, well, it won't do any good for the economy. It'll only help rich people. Well, unemployment is at record lows. Corporate enthusiasm, corporate optimism, relatively all-time highs. Right. Small business optimism. Low unemployment overall, very low unemployment for women, very low unemployment for African Americans, very low unemployment for Hispanics. So anybody who thinks the economy is being wrecked simply doesn't know what they're talking about.
No, please don't misunderstand me. I was not suggesting all the economy is being wrecked. The question is there a price being paid? Let me ask a specific question that's come up in the trade context, and that is the ZTE situation. I know there were negotiations last night up on Capitol Hill. Do you believe that there will be a compromise that will allow ZTE to continue to do business in the United States?
Well, there may very well be. The President and Secretary Mnuchin and I met with a bunch of Republican congressional leaders yesterday, and that was one of the many topics that we covered. I think the important thing is to modify ZTE's behavior from what it was before. We've now taken over $2 billion in fines out of them. For the first time ever, we've had the ability to implant into a company that had violated sanctions our code of conduct, our code of export control, and we have unfettered access to the company in order to monitor it. If there are any further violations, we will shut them down just as we did before, and we have the power to do that.
Okay, finally, Mr. Secretary, there's been this issue about short selling some shares in a shipping company. I don't want to go into the details of that. Frankly, I'm not sure I fully understand them, but you've certainly had to talk about them plenty. I have a more general question. Many of us were surprised, in fact, that senior government officials are involved in short selling or derivatives of any sort. For example, here at Bloomberg, we're not allowed to do that. In retrospect, given what you've been put through, would it be a better policy or rule to just say senior government officials shouldn't be engaged in things like short selling at all?
No, this is not what you would call a typical short sale. What happened, some shares in one company were not physically in my possession, and there was a whole process I had to go through to get them into possession so I could sell them. I had begun selling those shares, the ones that I did have possession of, months before. So when I learned about the new shares, wanted to close out that holding. It happened to be a company called Navigator. And as when the shares were delivered to me, my own shares, I used them to substitute. So there was no profit or loss on the so-called short sale. It was simply a means of implementing a transaction. And I had no gain or loss by change in the market price.
Please understand, there was nothing in my question that suggested anything improper had been done or anything ill-gotten gains, nothing like that. Right. I'm actually asking a more basic question, sort of a concession to the shortness of life, as it were. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't pleasant for you to even have to explain all this. Wouldn't it just be better to just have a simple rule that said senior government officials don't participate in things like short selling?
Well, this is not a typical short sale. A typical short sale is you borrowed stock that you do not own, you sell the borrowed stock, putting up collateral for it, and then when the stock goes down, you cover it and make a profit. That simply is not what happened here. I do think that that kind of short sale is not a good thing for government officials to do. But this was simply a technical means of complying with the delivery rules of the New York Stock Exchange. I didn't gain or lose regardless what the stock did after I entered into the transaction. Whereas in a short sale, if the stock went down, I would profit. If the stock went up, I would lose. My situation was one where I was totally indifferent as to the subsequent price of the stock. And as it happens, the stock is now at a higher level than it was when I sold it anyway.
Okay, fair enough. I think I do understand. I really want to thank you for taking the time, Mr. Secretary. I know you want to get back to your investment summit there in Washington. It's good of you to spend time with us. It's Wilbur Ross, U.S. Commerce Secretary.
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to clarify the situation. I very much appreciate that, because there's been a lot of hyperbole, a lot of innuendo, and a lot of misunderstanding. So thanks for the opportunity to clear it up.
It's our great privilege. Thank you, sir.